Hey, well, guess who? It's me, and I also have Daryl with me. Hey, Daryl.
Hi, Mark. How you doing? Hello, everybody.
I'm just fine, thank you. I am so happy I get to stream one night back. I was in Los Angeles for the last 4 days. I had to do some filming out there for a couple of new shows, and we did really nice. It was a good time. And we did some really neat stuff out there. So anyway, I wanted to welcome you all to the SkyTour LiveStream for tonight, August 10th, 2019. It's nice that we actually can do some streaming right now. We do have a gibbous moon out there, but rather than look at the moon, we are going to be looking at the beautiful jewels of the summertime sky. One of them is this globular cluster we're looking at right now. This globular cluster is in Cygnus the Swan, and I'll tell you exactly where it is right here. This is Measure 56. You remember M56, Daryl? We've talked about it before.
Oh, surely, yes.
Yeah. Yep. And there it is. It's right in Cygnus the Swan. How do we know it's Cygnus? Well, we can just show you the mythological view of Cygnus, which is right here. The swan right there with its wings. Deneb is the rear end, and you have Sadr, which is the center of the swan, and you have these two stars on the outside. And finally, we have absolutely gorgeous Albireo down here. Albireo is just a beautiful star, and we need to actually look at Albireo in some detail because it's sort of the eye of the swan. But we've seen Albireo before and talked about it, but maybe it's worth checking it out again. Hey Andy Morrow, nice to see you. I welcomed Gotcha Bear here, and D Smith is here, and Evan came along for the ride for a little while. That's excellent. Good to see you guys here. I know that Bill is streaming the Persids. We're doing another Deep Sky night, but we will be doing some Persids at some point as well. Hopefully before I leave on Wednesday. I'm heading to Norway to do a speaking tour, and that should be interesting. I've never been there, but I expect it'll be kind of cool. And maybe what I can do is actually stream from there. I'm not sure yet, but we'll try.
Lucky you. That's almost like Sweden. Haha.
You're
I heard
right.
Norway is really nice. I would love to visit that place someday.
Yeah, I never had Norway on my bucket list because, in February, it's like the last place on the whole planet that I would like to go.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I'm actually thinking of putting together an expedition in winter to northern Norway. Why in the world would I do that? I think you know, Daryl.
Yeah, Northern Lights.
Yeah, Norway is
August.
famous for its northern lights, and if you go up north to Trondheim or somewhere like that, you could actually be up close and personal to the northern lights in a way you've never seen them before. So I'm thinking of setting up an expedition. So if people want to do that, you can contact me either at SkyTour Radio at KGRAradio.com, SkyTour Radio at KGRAradio.com, or here, or wherever you can find me on Facebook. You can message me and give me some interest. And if I know there's enough people interested, I'll begin the process of putting such an expedition together. It would really be beautiful. And of course, I would teach people all about the auroras for those that didn't know, and I would explain how it works, and we can play with spectra if you wanted to even see what we're looking at in the sky. The different colors mean different things. It's really, really neat. A lot of fun. But, you got to be willing to endure the cold. I'm the first one to tell you that I don't like the cold, but I would do it if you guys wanted to go.
I used to live in the cold. I don't know if I could handle that nowadays.
No,
Where
I'm not talking about living in the
Colorado,
cold.
it's like it's like the climate hotspot of the state down here. It's a mild sunny days a lot of times in the winter. Winter shows up in springtime here, but we do get cold weather. And when I lived up in the high country, I lived up in Leadville, the highest town in the United States. And,
wow.
It was equivalent to, being at the Arctic tree line up in northern Canada, climate-wise.
That sounds so cold. But you know what? If you're going to see the Northern Lights, the whole idea is that, it'd be an official type expedition where we'd have, warm places to be. We'd of course, be warm. We can actually even arrange to, I think, see the Northern Lights from inside a heated building anyway. Looking through nice plate glass windows, and not even have to go outside if you didn't want to. You could set your camera up outside, and if you knew how to run it with Wi-Fi, well, then you can run the camera from inside the nice warm building. I'm very big on this remote stuff like that. I like remote things. I'm going to move us to Albireo anyway, just because I said before how nice it is, and I just got to check it out anyway. See what we got. Ready? So here we go. Off we go to Albireo. Here it is. It's a beautiful double star, which forms the eye of the swan in Cygnus. It's one of my favorite doubles.
Oh yeah, me too. That's probably the favorite double of mine.
Mm-hmm. Without doubt.
I think in for a penny, in for a pound, if I'm going to go to Norway to look at Northern Lights, I want the whole damn experience. I'll bring my winter clothing with me.
Yeah.
Pack boots and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
It'll probably cost a ton in luggage fees,
It depends. It depends, because maybe there's a way to rent winter wear when you're there that might be cheaper for a group. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, and then we can actually do that. I think that's a cool idea. So you could literally travel light, and then when you get there, for like the week or so, we just rent the cold weather gear, and the tents and or buildings, do observation of the auroras, take beautiful photos of them, and you go back with the best photos you've ever taken in your life, because I'll make sure you do. Not just you. I mean, Daryl, you know what you're doing, but I mean, people that are interested, I would make sure you got the best pictures of your life, because if you're going to come all that way with us, man, I'll make sure you do it, and I'll make sure you get what you got, what you're paying for.
Cool beans.
Hell yeah.
Betcha.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
It's only right.
Coldest I ever saw up in the mountains was 42 degrees below zero Fahrenheit.
Wow.
And I had to work outside once, and I was not dressed for it. when I worked up at the mine, we had to haul a load of oxygen and acetylene bottles out, and it was 35 below zero with 70-mile-an-hour winds, and it was snowed like 3 feet up there that day. And I was not dressed for it. God, I thought I was going to freeze to death. We all did. Not do it, though.
No, I'm sure that you didn't like the cold.
Not then, no.
No, I sure wouldn't. I would never enjoy that kind of cold.
Yeah. It got even worse at the end of shift. Well, I took off. I had a little Datsun pickup truck back then.
Yeah.
With a camper shell on the back, and there were always miners out there hitching a ride home every day. And I stopped at the bottom of the hill at the foot of the pass, and half a dozen guys piled into the back of my truck, and at least they were out of the wind, you know, and two more got in the front with me. And we went up to the top of the hill, top of the pass, and a huge gust of wind blew me sideways right off the road into a snowbank. And all my erstwhile companions piled out of the truck and immediately started thumbing a ride again, you know. Nobody would help me get the truck up. So I wound up having to hitchhike home truck.
Oh, wow.
In 35 below zero weather. Wow. That was no fun.
That's... Ugh. Hang on, I gotta say hi to some folks. Hey, Alejandro. I'm waving in the lower left-hand corner. You can see me. Hi, Alejandro. Hey, Karen. Hey, Marianne. Hey, Stacy. They're all out in Arizona listening into the SkyTour LiveStream right now, which is kind of cool. And take a moment to say, I'm going to be at the UFO Congress in September speaking. It's going to be September 4th through the 8th. It's probably the biggest and best UFO conference in the entire United States. And so, if you can make it, I would encourage you to go. Of course, I'll be speaking there, and there's a lot of other speakers there. You know, and Karen and Alejandro, they only get the best people for the UFO Congress, I can tell you that. And I've known Karen a long time, and she is really committed to task, and I really admire her for what she's done. So I would really encourage you, if you can, get out to Central Phoenix. It's an easy ride from Sky Harbor Airport, and get to the new venue for the UFO Congress this year. I think it'll be much more enjoyable than past UFO Congresses. You know, everything is nearby, and it's going to be a really cool venue. And of course, you get to hang with me and other people that are just pleasant people. You know, it seems like there's no egos for the speakers that attend the UFO Congress, and that's wonderful. You know, it's all like a little big happy family. Anyway, I hope you guys can attend. So I just wanted to give them a shout out as well. Because I don't know, actually in the chat, how many of you are going to think about going to UFO Congress? I'd like to hear how many of you think you might make it. It's September 4th through the 8th this year. And it will be in downtown Phoenix, not in Fountain Hills, Arizona this year. Fountain Hills is a little bit away, and you would have to rent a car to get out there. This basically you can Uber over to the venue. It'd be cheap. When I was just in Los Angeles actually, and never had used Uber before. And to get around, that's all I used. It's all I used. I used an Uber to get around, and it was great. You got to meet some really cool people. They're ordinary people that just decided to use their own cars to drive you around. But Uber protects you. They want you to be assigned to a driver that's responsible, and drivers have certain metrics they're supposed to follow. Let me just take a photo here of Alberio for you while I'm here. So I think that's it's kind of cool. And it was a neat little process that they came up with there, in a nice little company. But check it out, Yeah, there's Alberio. I've got a look at that beautiful colors of the two stars. This blue one's a B8 star, and this one here, this orange one is a K-type star. So, B type stars are blue, and the letter doesn't mean blue, it just happens to be blue. And the K type stars are orange. G is what we are, and those are more of a yellowy color, and then orange is next, and that's the K, followed by the red, which is the M. In the whole spectral classification, OBAFGKM. So we see that here. Another thing.
I wonder how that came about. You always have Amanda recite the mnemonic, "Will be a fine girl or guy, kiss me."
Yeah.
I wonder why they picked those numbers, those letters.
That was just that was actually the Morgan-Canaan classification system. And you can look up the history of it online if you wanted to read all about it. It's a really, it's one of those things that just became it ended up becoming a standard for whatever reason. The other thing is that's not all there are. There actually used to be a right now smack part, for RNS, but the RNS stars ended up going into other kinds of stars, like I believe Wolf-Rayet stars and so forth. So we ended up reclassifying the RNS, so you don't really talk about the RNS types which come, so it's OBAFGKM RNS. Well, now we just go to M, and then we have these additional strange types of stars, plus white dwarfs and so forth. Really cool stuff. Just by curiosity, these two stars are thousands of astronomical units apart, which is kind of neat. So it shows you that being, several thousand astronomical units apart, keep in mind, Neptune is like 30 astronomical units away from the sun. And these stars are more than, 10 times, 100 times that distance apart. So I think that's, gives you an idea of just what we're looking at here. So if you were on a star or on a planet circling this K-type component, this primary, we call it here, this star, you'd be on a planet circling it. Well, then this star would be bright in your sky, but it wouldn't be right on top of you, like it appears in this photo. It might be just another star in the sky, but it would be, brighter than Sirius, probably as bright, possibly as the full moon in your sky, but not as big as the full moon. So it might be the brightest star in your sky, but you wouldn't have any idea how close it was or how far it was, if you didn't have that technology to figure it out, Yeah, really interesting, Andy, thank you for putting in the link. Thank you, by the way. And Marianne, tell Karen she's more than welcome. I actually don't miss a chance to promote UFO Congress, actually. So let me tell you about Los Angeles, Daryl. I had a fun time last 4 days out there, and I'm bound by contract not to talk about exactly what I did, but I can say that I was filming for, obviously, the Discovery. We talked about that before. But then the next day, after filming all day out on the Los Angeles Pier waterfront, I ended up filming for a Travel Channel show, and I did a lot of stories for what appears to be a lot of episodes, and that's going to be really interesting as well. I got to talk about all kinds of astronomical wonders, things that we've talked about on SkyTour Radio, actually, and even talk about what causes them, which is kind of neat. I hadn't been able to do that before on a regular TV show because they don't let you talk in those technical types of terms, on the typical networks. They want you to speak at a 5th grade level, basically. That's actually what they tell you. That's exactly what they tell you, 5th grade level. And I'm like, wow, I can do it. I just don't like doing it, Yeah. So we're talking about jewels tonight. I'm going to bring you over to this guy here.
I hope you'll let us know when both shows are on. I was unaware of the one on the Travel Channel. I'd like to know about that one too.
Yeah, I'll let you know. The thing is, when we were filming the episode of this particular show for Discovery, this particular show was premiering on Discovery that very night for its first episode. and I was doing the 8th episode, the last one of the season. And as a little teaser, the show builds up to the episode that I was in, and there's something really cool that we talk about in that episode, which becomes sort of like a neat little I don't know, I won't call it a cliffhanger, but sort of like a interesting bombshell. The writers were actually very good, and it was neat to be part of that. But I did get to tell a few things that no one has, no one's heard before, which I think is really nice. I'm going to do 10 seconds at 8,000 here, and I'm going to move a little bit east, a little bit north, and then bring me back here a little bit. I'm just got a suspicion about where this actually is. Hey, Dude W. Nice to see you here tonight. Thanks for coming. Harry, good to see you. I just noticed you're here. Thank you for dropping by. Oh, look at that, Daryl. I got it right on the money.
Cool.
I had tried to, I wanted to get this cluster centered up, and I got it right there. There she is. And this cluster is known as NGC 6743. It's an open cluster up here in Cygnus the Swan. These little jewels are really cool because, they go almost unnoticed, But, when you look at them, you can actually see, you see, wow. And most of the stars in these clusters are all the same type and mostly the same age. Sometimes we actually see stars that are very different ages, and you go, wait, how did that happen? And the answer is because we're forgetting that space is 3D. So sometimes we see a star that's an interloper that's not really in that cluster. And it just happens to look like it's in the same cluster, but it's just in front of it or behind it. And it's hard because as humans, we don't typically think of that, So is there anything else you'd like to see tonight, Daryl?
Go back to your classical star chart there, and I spied a little ring up above.
Oh, I mean this guy. Yes. Yeah, Daryl is talking about, of course, the Ring Nebula, which is right here. And we're also going to look at the dumbbell as well. So let's just check it out. So let's just take this telescope right over to this location, shall we? I think that would be great. Here we go. And now we see the stars pulling in here. Yeah. Thanks, Harry. I gotta say, people like Harry, who've joined us, relatively recent, subscriber to SkyTour LiveStream. If I read it right, he's come along, and he finds that he learns a lot from these streams, and he enjoys watching them. I think Harry, you told me you actually watched one whole stream over again in its entirety. Why would you want to punish yourself like that? That's very nice, Harry. I actually liked hearing that because it means that the streams do have some type of replayability, Okay, let's pop this in now. Okay, let's try 10 seconds at 8,000 ISO, shall we?
It's interesting. I noticed on the star chart you had up a little bit ago.
Sure.
The two stars at the bottom of Lyra that lay to either side of the Ring Nebula.
Yep.
One of them is named Sheliak.
Sheliak, yeah.
And that's another Star Trek name. I wonder if that's where they got that at. That's who are the Sheliak? They were the ones. They were coming to take back a planet that had human colonists on it, and Picard wound up foiling them with minutiae from the treaty that made them wait. And
really,
they were not pretty people, but they were called the Sheliak. I didn't see that sometimes in Star Trek, like Alpha Ceti.
Yeah.
You see this the whale. The star's name is Menkar,
Oh yeah, Menkar.
and,
Yeah.
and of course Alpha Ceti 5 and Alpha Ceti 6. Well, that's where they ditched Khan.
That's right.
You know, Khan.
Yeah. Khan. And then Khan got them back, but that was all part of their plan. Yeah. Wow.
Anyway, that.
That's very cool.
It is. See the star in the center too.
Yeah, this is, here you can see the M57 is a planetary nebula, and they're called planetaries because when they were first discovered, they looked like they could be mistaken for planets, or they looked like they could be faint planets because they kind of looked round in small scopes. This one especially, and this is really interesting. Thank you, Harry. And it's really interesting because this particular one, there's some controversy as to how it formed, what it really looks like. Because remember, all we know about astronomy, everything, has to do with light that arrives here on Earth from there. And we're seeing the light after it's been altered by space. We see the light after it's been Doppler shifted. We're seeing the light after it's been changed by the particulates that are in between in interstellar space when the light's passing through it. Where we suffer things called extinction of the light. We suffer reddening. We suffer many things. So we actually have to remove all those processes out of our results to figure out what's really going on. So it takes a lot of work. Okay, for instance, the farther something is away, the greater the problem of interstellar reddening is. Interstellar reddening is when you have dust between us and the object we're looking at, and just like the sun on the horizon, the stuff in between the sun and us scatters some of the light, and blue light loves to be scattered, so mostly it's the higher frequency blue light that gets scattered, leaving a redder looking thing. So we call it interstellar reddening. It happens with space too, because space isn't empty. All right? And we learn, for instance, with fast radio bursts, something amazing. Now we've thought for a long time that there wasn't enough mass to have a universe the size that the universe is, and because there wasn't enough mass to make a big bang with this much mass. We needed a lot more, roughly half as much again, more. However, it turns out that fast radio bursts coming here from billions, and I mean 10 billion sometimes, light years away. These high energy bursts that make it here are not the same as when they left. They are distorted by things between the galaxies. Those things between the galaxies are atoms and other dust clouds that are there that we did not know about. And by the virtue of the fast radio burst passing through those clouds imbued the fast radio burst with some qualities and characteristics that we could decipher when the burst finally reached us. And we decipher it through a characteristic of the fast radio burst that's called dispersion. So basically, think of it as stretching out the fast radio burst a little bit longer than it should be, because of the fact that some of the light is essentially held back or absorbed and scattered a little bit by the intervening material between the galaxies. And the nature of how it's scattered and removed and or held back a little bit tells us what kind of material it is. And we've discovered that there's a lot of missing mass out there. So it's interesting that we may find that less dark matter is going to be used to try and explain the mass loss or the missing mass in the universe. However, we do know that fast radio bursts have shown that there's at least some more between the galaxies. So you see, little by little, the universe gives up its secrets. And by the way, guess what? We think we know a little bit more. It's a theory, but we think we know how fast radio bursts actually work and why they're occurring. I don't know if you saw that at all, Daryl. There's some news articles and some things in the journals. I don't know if you actually picked that up.
I heard about it. I did not look into it closely.
Yeah, here's basically what the thought is now is that these fast radio bursts that come from billions of light years away are actually from special neutron stars that have a very, very high magnetic field. It's a star we've known about before. In some cases, when a star goes supernova, the neutron star that it leaves behind is highly, highly magnetic. Has a very, very powerful magnetic field, one that could tear you to pieces, rip your atoms apart. Right. And that's that particular type of interesting neutron star and dangerous neutron star is called a magnetar. A magnetar. And these magnetars will sometimes throw off a very, very high energy flare. When I say very high energy, I mean the kind of flare you notice many billions of light years away. Okay? And when that flare comes off that magnetar, it will sometimes impact other material that was previously ejected at a lower velocity from the star. And when it hits that, because of the highly magnetic nature of the flare and the star itself, it makes the magnetic fields in this debris that it strikes go absolutely crazy. And this debris starts spewing these highly charged, highly intense signals, which we see as a fast radio burst. And it begins winging its way here. But here's something for you to think about. When we see a fast radio burst that comes from 10 billion light years away, think about it. It left the galaxy 6 billion years before the Earth was even here. Isn't that crazy? About 5 billion years, 5.4 billion years before Earth was even here. And as it was making its way from that galaxy to here, Earth formed, life began on Earth, cyanobacteria about 3 billion years ago started building up the oxygen in the atmosphere. Then we had the first animals, the first insects, we had the Cambrian era, okay? We had the Permian era overall, we had the Great Permian extinction, we had the other areas, we had the Jurassic age, we had the Jurassic extinction 65 million years ago when the dinosaurs were eventually killed off. We saw mammals in the Permian be nearly wiped out, giving rise to the age of the dinosaurs. Dinosaurs took over. Reptiles, age of the reptiles began, lasted till the Jurassic, when the Jurassic age ended with the Chicxulub impact off Yucatan. Then that left the mammals to rise again from the shadows and take dominance back on the planet. And then we're here today, and then the fast radio burst comes in. So all the history of the Earth, everything that happened on Earth, it happened billions of years after that radio burst left its galaxy. It's just mind-boggling to think about, because the time scales of the universe are absolutely amazing, don't you think?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
You talked about the interstellar reddening earlier, or whatever the cosmological scale was. Objects that far away, there must be a cosmological redshift going on too, I would think. Like the cosmic microwave background, the echo of the Big Bang.
Yes.
Well, it's down in microwaves now, but boy, when that first got released before, we see it so redshifted, that was some high energy stuff. If we're, you could say, seeing this fast radio burst, seeing in quotes now, seeing a fast radio burst in radio waves, I wonder what kind of frequency those were when they were generated.
Well, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. What? And for those who may not have got what Daryl was saying, I will paraphrase. The energy when it left had to be much, much higher than what we see now, because over time, or more intense, we should say, over time, the strength of that signal is going to become attenuated or reduced by everything it hits in the interstellar medium along the way. Plus the fact that the universe is expanding, and that signal, of course, had to overcome the expansion of the universe and also reach us that way. So that also takes some energy out and changes the frequency of the light reaching us. And that is called a redshift, and that means that this material leaving that galaxy probably, by all imagination in my mind, probably was seen by every single star in that galaxy. It was probably an unbelievable outburst, but it was directional somewhat. So I think that there might have been stars and populations that maybe did not see it. It's possible, you know. You know what I mean?
Yes. What kind of what frequency do you think it originally emitted at? Though, I mean, are you talking like gamma rays or?
Well, no, because this was way up in the high gigahertz range as well. And the other thing you'll notice is that they drop off in frequency when they get here. They sound like pew. You know, when they did what's called sonification, which I actually talked about on the Discovery Channel show. I'm sorry, Travel Channel show. When they do this sonification, they actually put an arbitrary sound to it. You know, so the higher frequency is really high sound, and the lower frequency, low frequency sound. So you can actually use more of your senses to understand what actually happened, what actually came in. You look at it, and it's a sloping curve. It starts up way up high, then it comes down low, and trails off a little to the right. So it goes, pew. Right. And so you say, wow, that's really interesting, because what that's telling us is that something is causing that frequency to lower. Well, it turns out it's not the Doppler shifting. That is, it's not the fact that it's so far away. That actually happens because of the way the energy is being effectively dissipated into this debris that this flare from this magnetar hits. When this flare hits that debris, it gets all excited and it starts spiraling into a magnetic field. And then it starts off really, really high, and then as it hits more material, it's kind of slowed down a little bit and gets a lower and lower frequency. So it goes pew. And the current mathematical predictions show that that's just about what it should do, but there's problems with it. But it's just a theory. It's hypothetical at the moment. But it's a possibility that this may be exactly what's causing these fast radio bursts. Really neat, exciting, and it's just a very cool field of study, to be honest. You know?
Sure.
So.
What are we looking at?
This is another planetary nebula. I'm just trying to get us. I'm getting pretty good at bringing it right into the center of the field. Okay, let's try this. 10 seconds at 8,000. And we should see it. And what it is,
along the
this
line
guy.
of what you were saying just now, about, you know, the fast radio burst and it dropping from a high frequency to a low and the sonification of it. No, I wondered, back when LIGO and Virgo saw the two neutron stars, the first one, that made the news, that there were reports in other domains later, after the initial, gravitational wave was detected, that other telescopes and other spectra went out, and they did see the after effects of that collision, if I remember correctly. The echoes or whatever at lower frequencies. We're kind of jumping horses here, but we saw the gravitational waves first, and then say they saw ultraviolet or infrared or visible or whatever later from the same event, I do believe.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't remember specifically what was seen that was different.
Well, just roughly saying, it was sort of a visual counterpart or a visual after effect of the collision, I think.
Yeah. I think this is Minkowski's footprint, the thing we're just looking at. You can see a little tiny smudge there. It's actually it's this right here, I believe. I think it's this guy right here. It's a early planetary nebula. It's one, but there's a star that's just beginning to shed its outer layers, and you can see it right here. And so it's leaving a little blue shell around the star to begin with. That was just really interesting, actually, to see these things. Right there.
Uh-huh.
Well, you might say, well, how do you find all these things in the middle of nowhere? Well, sometimes I'm not even sure, and I've got to reference other things to check it out, to see if I got it right. Well, that's cool. Well, let's just take a look while we're here. Let's back out for a minute, and let's come down. Let's come down to the Dumbbell Nebula while we're talking planetaries. I told you guys the other night, the last time we streamed, that planetary nebulae tend to have a certain known diameter, because beyond that, the star would not be able to ionize the gas and make the gas glow beyond a certain distance from the star. Of course, it depends on the star, but what's usually in the middle of a planetary nebula is a white dwarf, and the white dwarf tends to be a certain temperature. They tend to all be the same sort of temperature, so we would actually be able to say with some good authority that the white dwarf only gets to a certain temperature, and that it can only ionize hydrogen and oxygen out to a certain distance from it. So we get an idea of how far away that is. James Dugan, how's it going down in Australia, my friend? Good to hear from you. Yeah, there's the Dumbbellen. Das ist Dumbbellen. Yeah, actually it's pretty nice tonight, considering. Of course, I did run out there earlier tonight, spent a lot of time in the dome, and I also recollimated the telescope. As you can see by the star images, that's the central star. If you remember last time, the star images had a weird reflection off to one side, and I got sick of seeing that, so I fixed that tonight.
All right.
So you can see really nicer shots here. Yeah, there we go. See that? A little instantaneous processing for you.
All right.
Hello, Ronald. Good to see you. Yeah. So we got some cool stuff going on out there.
It's a nice image, especially with all the moonlight.
Yeah, and and that's the thing. I'm gonna try and kick it up a notch here. Let me go back here, and let's try and go to 15 seconds, and dare to go 10,000. What I've done is I actually remove the noise. So when I see an image that has some noise in it, I don't really fret too much, because I know I can get rid of it. I get rid of the noise pretty easily now these days. I'm also using a new program to put images together, or stack as we call it. And this new stacking process can actually remove some light pollution and other factors during the process, and that actually kind of looks nice. Looks kind of nice. I like it. Oh yeah, look at this. See, here we've got this. We can see these wisps around here. I'm also getting a new filter for the telescope, guys. I'm going to be getting one that's what's called a UHT, ultra high contrast. Oh, UHC, sorry, ultra high contrast. And we're going to see how that works, because this is just a standard light pollution filter, and it's kind of run of the mill. It's average. It doesn't specifically look to improve everything. And I want to try and pull more nebulae and data from nebulae out. And that's what this is all about. That's what that'll be all about. So that new filter is going to hopefully do some things nice for us. But they're not cheap. They're hundreds of dollars for a single piece of 2-inch glass. And I use very large filters because the telescope has a 2-inch aperture at the back end. And most people will use the standard size aperture, which is 1 1/4. I use 2-inch because 2-inch is what it's got. 2-inch gives you the full field. I mean, look, you get all the stars in the field without any kind of vignetting here, you know, and vignetting means like darkening of the corners, and it's kind of a circular field. You see that in a scope like ours, but that has a 1 1/4-inch eyepiece in it rather than a 2-inch.
Mark, do you follow Astro Backyard on YouTube?
I do.
Okay, he's been raving about a new filter lately. Is that the same one you're talking about? I forget what it's called offhand, but he says it's just the best thing out there.
Yeah, he did a review, and he was talking about these particular filters, and he put them up head-to-head, checking them out. And the UHC filter was very good. And then he rated it against some of the other filters he was using, and they were all very good. It just depends what you want. But don't forget, hey, Cindy Murphy, it's one of these things where this observatory is going to be remote. I think I told you all before that I basically had a wonderful discussion with people that own this land out in Arizona in the desert, and they're very happy to host SkyTour LiveStream Observatory on their land. So I will be putting in a building, concrete pad. They know what I need. They know I have to do this, and they've already got people also that can work on it. And it's going to be a roll-off roof observatory with multiple piers, so that I can allow other people to put their telescopes in there and run them as well. It's going to be kind of like a neat observatory, and if a university wants to rent one of the piers to do some work, more power to them. It won't affect SkyTour LiveStream. We can still do our thing. They can still do their thing. You know? So I'm looking forward to doing that. That'll be kind of an interesting approach. So this is the Dumbbell Nebula, and it doesn't look that bad, considering that not too far away in that direction is a gibbous moon. You know?
I think it's great. You can see the apple core shape of it.
Yes, you certainly can. Hello, Daisy and Zoe. Thank you for coming by. Thanks, Harry. I think that the tracking... I got a little system for trying to get the tracking done. But I also did do something called collimate the scope. There was a little bit of an issue with the mirrors. And you know, when we looked at the star images last time, we noticed that these star images weren't round. They had little flares off one side. That's an indication that there's not your collimation, the mirror alignment was off a little bit. And that's not the case here tonight. You know, so that's another thing I have to worry about is collimating the scope once it's out there. I'm thinking, you know, Daryl, maybe I can put some kind of auto collimator on the telescope when it's out there. I can do it from a distance, you know.
You were reading my mind, Mark. I was wondering about that. I've said before that there must be some sort of market down in Arizona for telescope mechanics, you know, for want of a better word, telescope technicians.
Yeah.
A lot of people are running remote observatories down there, and somebody has to be taking care of them.
Yeah.
You know, they're not cheap, and they need to be tuned up occasionally. I would not be surprised at all if there are telescope techs for hire down there.
My plan is that you know, before I'm living there, I'm actually going to be going out there once a month to do maintenance on the observatory anyway. But that's, you know, because I'm crazy that way. I just want to get the best photos I can get, the best quality I can get, you know, for the best people on the planet, which is you guys that are here watching. You know, I really enjoy that you come out here and look with us. What do we got here? This guy here, NGC 6823. Well, there's a cluster that's associated with a nebulous nebulosity. It's probably a reflection nebula, perhaps, but it's also a gibbous moon night, so I don't know that we're going to see anything, but we're going to check it out anyway, just in case. And off we go into the wild blue yonder. Yeah. Let us see what we get. So you guys like the music at all?
I like it. Sort of easy listening jazz.
Yeah, it's just sort of friendly stuff, you know. Oh, Harry, I can focus the telescope from here inside the building, but I went out earlier and I had to make sure the mirrors were aligned to each other. And that alignment is done on the end of the telescope. There are 3 knobs, and it's a hand process where you tune the mirrors to each other. You don't have to do it every night. You do it once. And it's kind of easy, you know, once you get used to it. So this time I actually aligned the mirrors in about, I don't know, maybe a minute and a half. The first time I did it, it took an hour when I first ever did it, you know. Okay, this 10 seconds. No, let's do 15.
I'm sorry, that raises a question, Mark. You might have just answered. Do you have Bob's knobs on your secondary mirror?
Yes, and what Daryl's referring to are these little hand knobs that you turn to get the collimation very easily, rather than what you used to have to do with little Allen wrench screws, little wrenches that you had to use. And in the dark, that was just impossible.
Yeah, I read somewhere recently that if you have Bob's knobs to adjust your corrector, your secondary, that they do go out of collimation much more often, which I bet is what you're seeing happen.
Yeah.
You know, that you're having to redo collimation so often.
Yep.
And they say it's just a fact of life with those knobs. If you do use the conventional Allen screws, whatever they are nowadays, they tend to hold collimation much longer.
Yeah.
But they are a royal pain to have to adjust at night, especially as you mentioned.
Yeah. I did it at night, but I was reached up, and just I could feel at the very end. You very lightly touch the end, and you can feel which one it is. And basically, you turn the knob, and you move the image on the screen. Of course, I'm not using an eyepiece. I'm using the screen, guys. I move the image on the computer screen, which is looking from the camera, in the direction where the mirror image, where the shape has to go in order to line it up. The image you see is like a donut, okay? And these scopes are called catadioptrics or Schmidt-Cassegrains, and basically the light comes down into the tube, hits a main primary mirror, bounces up off that mirror, and hits another mirror that's dead center in the view, and then goes down again, reflected off that secondary mirror, which is that's what it's called. It goes through a hole in the main mirror and then out to the eyepiece. So the light bounces around. Another term is a folded optical path telescope, which is what this is. So you can put a much larger aperture telescope in a much smaller building. And that's part of the value of it. So it's really kind of cool. And when we look at trying to keep those mirrors aligned to each other, the secondary mirror has to be perfectly aligned to that main primary. And when it's not, you get weird shapes. So I think, like we've had before, these little weird comet tails on some of our images. I'm not talking about the ones out on the edge of the field, because out on the edge of the field here, this is a richer field telescope, meaning it's a wider field. You get that anyway. That's part of the lens system. The good part of our view is always going to be in the center, no matter what, around about this much area. So we always try to center up our objects. But it works. And so to collimate those mirrors and get them adjusted to get like this beautiful view. Like this is actually got a little bit of star walk here. You can see a little bit slightly elongated, but this is where the nebulosity is in this cluster associated with nebulosity. And the thing is, for us to collimate this automatically, it would have to take each of those knobs and put a tiny little motor on it and set it up so that this tiny little motor could run. Each motor could be run, and you could actually make the image. You could move the motor in a certain direction, a certain way, and get each of these knobs to rotate in such a way that you can actually collimate your mirror without having to go out to the telescope at all. You know?
No, I hear you. You're increasing complexity, of course, but that may be inevitable if you want to do it remotely. I have to give Bob credit, the guy who came up with Bob's knobs. I have never seen them. I've never used them. I remember seeing them advertised in the back of Sky and Telescope magazine a long time ago when he first started selling them, and more power to Bob. I wonder what they charge for a set of those.
It was only like $25.
Okay, that was probably about 50 cents worth of materials to make those.
I'm sure.
That much.
I'm sure.
Yeah, in my experience as an industrial mechanic, well, we had all sorts of vendors, and we had all sorts of tools and fasteners and knobs, and we bought a knob kit once that is made to had various different kinds and sizes of knobs in it. And all you needed to know was what size your screw was, screw pitch, and the heads for these knobs were made to be pressed onto Allen screws of a certain size.
Yep.
And so, hey, I need 3 number 8 screws or 3 number 4s, with a cap screw, and you just pick out those knobs out of the selection you had, and you gently push them onto the top of the screws. So Bob's $25 set of screws probably cost Bob about 25 cents to make. But hey, that's free enterprise at its best,
Well, I mean, and, for his idea, he should definitely be rewarded. It was a good idea.
No, sure. He took something that was already out there and just, made an astro-specific application for it, and it filled a need, and more power to Bob.
Yeah. What I would like to do is actually write a program that will auto-collimate. Do it by itself. You don't have to touch it. It'll do all the sensing and figure it out for you.
Look for the out-of-focus image to be egg-shaped or something of the sort, and adjust it to eliminate that?
Yeah. Look for the airy disc, it's called, in the middle, the round completion disc for the people listening. Look for that, and look to make sure that the secondary shadow is in fact dead center in the image when it's dead center in the telescope view.
Sure.
I mean, that's not so hard.
To put it technically, yeah.
Yeah, that's not so hard. So I think that's pretty cool. That's not bad. Okay, now
airy discs are great.
Yeah. So where we are now is we're at the Poodle cluster. All right, here in Cygnus the Swan, another little gem here in the summer sky, and I'm going to move us down a little bit, and move us a little to the west. Sorry, I meant east and then west. Why is east then west? You ask. Okay, I'll answer that. If we go east and west, then what happens is I'm able to get rid of a problem that occurs with telescopes, something called backlash. And backlash is when the gear mesh isn't perfect, and it's a problem with every geared system on planet Earth. And there's the Poodle cluster, and we got a little bit of a walk here, so we're gonna do this again. Yeah. And so what that means is that we would actually be able to, or wouldn't be able to get a perfect tracking right from the get-go. We would actually have to line, and I can actually train the telescope to take care of backlash because it'll do just what I'm doing. It'll do this. It'll move like this and make it move to get rid of the backlash. And so we'd have a shot like this when we're done. See? Beautiful shot. Here's the poodle cluster. And you're going to say to me, why is it called a poodle cluster? I don't know. You know? I don't know, Mr. Scott. I do not know.
I've said before, sometimes it seems like Stellarium has some rather fanciful names for their deep sky objects.
Yep. Hey there, Bonnie Stanley. Thanks for joining us. Bonnie is someone I met out in Las Vegas at a conference that I attended. And she has a host of interesting experiences to talk about. It's really fantastic. Thanks for dropping by, Bonnie. Yeah, so the poodle cluster looks pretty tonight. Yeah, little gem. What else you want to see, Daryl?
Oh, golly.
Oh, golly.
I was thinking earlier today.
Well, that's your first mistake.
I'm sorry?
That's your first mistake.
Yeah. Sagittarius, it's about prime time for the Milky Way. Should be pretty much straight up and down. I'd have to look at a map for comparing me to you. You're 2 hours ahead of me, of course. But Sagittarius is prime time right now, and that's where you'll find the most cool deep sky objects, just because that's where the center of the galaxy is in that direction, and they tend to cluster in that part of the sky.
And it's also where the moon is.
Yeah. You might have to move your dome, though, if we were to go down that way.
Well, sure, but we also have the moon is in Sagittarius right now. See this?
Exactly.
Here's Sagittarius right here. How do we know? Well, we see the teapot, for those of us that know Sagittarius, but we can also see the archer here. And that lets us know that we're in Sagittarius. And there's a lot of beautiful things down here to see. The Sagittarius star cloud is kind of in this region, and the moon is just drowning it right out. There's just no way to see it, you know. We have, the Omega Nebula is here. We've got the Eagle Nebula here, just a couple of degrees away from the moon. So there's just no way we're going to be able to see these things with any type of clarity tonight, and that's thanks.
I'm sorry.
You know what? No, that's fine.
Asked.
That's okay.
Yeah, I knew the moon is in Sagittarius, of course. It was in Scorpius last night.
Yep.
Well, a little bit away over there, Saturn. I don't know if that's your cup of tea or not. You're probably still looking for interference from the moon.
But see, it's a planet, so that might not be so bad. And right near it, we have Jupiter over here, too. But Jupiter's almost on its way to setting. So that's not going to look so good. But maybe. It's possible. I would have to go out and move the dome regardless, and that's okay. I mean, I'm happy to move the dome. All right? If you'll notice, we've got, rising in the east, we have Pegasus and Andromeda overhead right now, where we're looking. This is literally looking almost straight up here. We're fairly close to what we call the zenith, looking straight up. And it's really cool. Hey, look at the Mothra cluster. I want to know what that is. So we're going to check out the Mothra cluster right now. Off we go to the Mothra cluster. What it is, I don't know. Then I can go out and move the dome, and maybe we can check out some things that are elsewhere in the sky.
Well, I try to minimize dome moves, of course. It's easy for me to say. I don't need to get up and move them. If you were still pointing up there in the general direction of Cygnus,
yeah. You still there? Daryl.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
You muted on yourself.
I muted myself accidentally, sorry.
Okay. If we're still pointed up towards Cygnus, you said?
Yeah. I have this dongle on my headset, wire cable.
Okay.
with the volume and on-off control, and I keep hitting it accidentally. Sorry
Okay.
about that.
No problem. So you were saying if we're still pointed up towards Cygnus, and you were going to suggest possibly something to look at?
Oh, I don't know.
10
Deneb
seconds.
comes to mind. North American Nebula, Pelican Nebula.
Yeah, but it's the moon's out. We can't really see those.
And this is true. Well,
10 seconds at 10,000 on this Mothra cluster. Let's check it out. Oh, look at that. Look at this. This is a beauty. Look at this cluster. You know, this is an example of this is actually kind of cool, because this is an example of a cluster, for instance, that probably was a little more tight-knit when it was created. And then what happens is, as the stars form, they begin to, with their powerful young stellar winds, they begin to push the gas out of the region where they formed. And this is sort of a self-limiting mechanism, and it's not intentional, of course, but it's a self-limiter as to how to get a certain number of stars in a region and no more. And this is what we're looking at here. These stars that were formed here pushed most of the gas away, which is why we don't see any more gas. But that's how most clusters are. And then when that gas is pushed out, it gets to a certain distance and it's no longer glowing. Certainly, when it's in a location where there's a lot of gas, you will see gas like the Lagoon Nebula, or the Eagle Nebula, or the Orion Nebula. But you know, these could have had similar nebulae in their distant past when they were first formed, but maybe not. But see, this is that kind of thing. So this is a beautiful little star cluster, and I just think it's absolutely stunning. A little jewel box, you know, and
nice.
It would otherwise go completely unnoticed. So let's go back and see what we might do to notice some more clusters that might otherwise get lost. Well, let's see. We have the Veil Nebula. Now we do have, and I'll try it, why not? This is the supernova remnant in Cygnus called the Veil. And this is the Eastern Veil. The Eastern Veil actually tends to show up even with the moon, so I've taken shots of the Veil with a full moon, and it actually didn't come out poorly. It was pretty interesting, you know. But that just happened to be because of the certain brightness it has and so forth. So we're gonna just do this. We're gonna move it to the east and the south and to the west, and then take 15 seconds at 12,800. I think I want to bring us a little more east.
Excuse me a moment, please.
Sure. And pop over west a little. There we go. Now let's take a picture here. 15 seconds, 12,800. The Veil Nebula East. The Veil is a supernova remnant. So when we look at the Veil, we're actually seeing oxygen atoms that are doubly ionized that are making the blue glow. And there's some hydrogen that are making this this glow. Here you can see. Let me just get rid of this here. You can see the Veil remnant that I was trying to get at right here. I moved a little too far. Let me get you back, okay? Alright, so, and to get it back, I'm going to move us a little bit toward the west. And a little bit south. Okay. Now, I'm going to pop us over and do another 15-second shot at 12,800, okay? Well, Cindy and Harry, that was nice of you guys to introduce yourselves. Wonderful. Alright, so let's see what we get now. Yeah, it's better. Dead center. Alright. So, this is our raw view of the nebula, the Veil Nebula, Eastern Veil Nebula. You can see a little red here. You can see most of the oxygen here. There's some more red up here. It's a very beautiful filamentary structure. Let's do some instant processing. Kaboom. And you can see a little better. All right. I like doing instant processing for you. I hope you guys like that. The other thing we can do on this, which is kind of interesting, is we can actually do something to help make it a little bit sharper. How's that look? That's interesting. You can see the red now a little better. You can see the filamentary structure. And if I take like 25 of these and stack them together, then you can of course see it far better. But you know, for a telescope that's you're looking at all these things live, this is not a bad thing. This is not bad at all. But that's the beautiful filamentary east veil. And it's right there. It's really pretty. So
very nice. I'm back, by the way.
I know, I heard you.
Yeah.
And now let's actually go to 52 Cygni over here and check out the western veil, shall we? The western veil is another interesting location. And we'll see the star 52 Cygni right there come into the view. And that tells me where the nebula is. It's to the left and snakes up like this. It really is cool. It's an interesting snaky nebula. And 52 Cygni dutifully came right into the dead center. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it this way a little bit. I'm going to actually move it down to about there. And then pop it westward a little bit. That little westward pop is what does it for us. And now we'll do 15 seconds at 12,800 to check out the western veil now, which is the other side of the supernova remnant. All right, and we'll see that in just 3 seconds. There we are. And there you go. You can see it snaking up. Here's 52 Cygni. And you can see this snaking up like this. Let me do a little instant processing, see if it helps it out. Oh yeah, look at, see that? That subtle, oh God, it's so beautiful. This subtle, beautiful little nebula. I don't know what it is. I've just, since discovering I could see it, it's been great. Now we walked a little bit, so it's not as clear. But I'm going to actually fix that. We're going to fix that right now. I'm going to take this photo again. And I'm going to go over to this here again. And you're going to see it. And the next one that comes in is either going to be better or worse. So the stars are a little elongated right here. And it's going to come in exactly the same way as we see it here. So let's see what we get. Will we get dots? Maybe a little better. But it's still got a little bit of walk to it, but not as much. But that's neat how that veil is. There's like a point to that right there. That's really pretty. And let's see. One thing we want to see here is actually that down. In fact, 52 Cygni is right below here. You can't really see. It's just right below this bottom of the frame right here. Oh, thanks, D. I don't know. There's never. You know what? I'll tell you one thing. You know, D says, you know, you never feel dumb asking questions. Well, of course not. You know why? Because I was where you are once, or where others of you are. I didn't know everything, and I ask questions too. I mean, that's the only way we learn as humans, is we ask questions. And since I've been on the other side asking questions of people that knew better than me on astronomy in the beginning, I know what it feels like. You know, from that side. And I would never embarrass anyone. I would never throw anyone under the bus because they didn't know something. To me, that is just treason against a human being. I just would never do that to anyone. You know, I encourage questions, and I don't want anyone to ever feel like they're stupid. And anyone that made someone feel stupid for asking a question, I would also treat somewhat poorly for doing so. So that's just me. You know what I mean, Daryl?
Well, Captain Kirk in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan told Lieutenant Savick, "We learn by doing, Lieutenant."
That's right. So
in the turbo lift, remember?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I think it was when she was asking him how, or no, that was later, when she asked how he solved the Kobayashi Maru scenario.
Yes, he cheated.
Yeah, we learn by doing.
Yeah, this is beautiful. Yeah, see, and here's the thing, you really get a benefit from not seeing these really fancy process stacked images at times. This is what you see with your eye, and you wonder, like, you see these beautiful shots. Hey, David Schmidt, welcome. Hi, Rockstar's here with us.
Hey, David.
You get these beautiful photos, and you say, this is the reality. Here's the subtle visibility of these nebulae that you see in photos that show them so brightly and all so big, but this is real. This is the real world. This is what it really looks like. This is how you'd look to your eye in your spaceship going by. Wouldn't get any brighter than this. In fact, it'd be a lot dimmer than this to your eye. In fact, you might not even see it with your eye. And that's another issue too. You might not even see it with your eye. So even this is not real, and that's not reality. Reality is actually this here, okay? This is the closest thing to reality that we have is right here. There's 52 Cygni. And we know the filamentary structure's here, but we would see this with our eye. We wouldn't even see that nebula.
That's almost the definition of a faint fuzzy right there.
All right. Sure is. Well, let's check out something else now as we move here.
Some people's expectations are so high from seeing, astro images online, highly processed or in magazines and such. And,
yep.
I mean, many of us, we've seen spectacular things through the telescope,
yes.
But a lot of the time it's pretty subtle, actually, and you have to have a appreciation of that, I think, to really get more out of, looking through the eyepiece or
I don't disagree.
Through the camera, so to speak.
Yeah. We're going to go with the Crescent Nebula here. This is another location that is kind of a favorite. I mean, I really enjoy this location because the Crescent Nebula is sort of in a rich area of stars. And the Crescent is actually the remnant, or not, I wouldn't even say the remnant, but it is the ongoing process created by a Wolf-Rayet star, which is a star that is extremely hot and is literally in the process of, in part, blowing off its hydrogen gas into the interstellar medium. And not because it's becoming a planetary nebula, every time, but because it is a process that these stars tend to do, which is really cool, but they are amongst the hottest stars there are. Let's just do 15 seconds at 12,800 here tonight and see what we get. And again,
Thor's helmet is a classic example of a Wolf-Rayet star.
That's correct. And and this is a very different looking nebula as well because of that. It looks very different from Thor's helmet. Okay. And it's here. You can see it right there. But let me make it a little more visible, shall we? Okay. So you can see it here. A little instant processing will make it even clearer. There we go. You can see the curve of this. Not bad. It doesn't look that bad. The star images are actually reasonable. We have a little... we're running at a high ISO, so 12,800. But hey, it's pretty wild. Yeah, so the star that created it's down here somewhere, and it's actually pushing away all this gas. But when we see the gas, we don't really see. We don't see exactly what's going on, because part of what we're seeing is the snowplow effect from the high radiation levels that are being pushed out, which are blowing gas with their winds, blowing gas outward and piling it up on other areas, and it reaches something called a shock front. and it'll reflect off of that, go back toward the star, which then it sends out more stuff, which hits that incoming shock wave, forms another shock front. It's very complicated, guys. Very complicated what goes on at these stars, these Wolf-Rayet stars. And this particular nebula is a crescent shape here, like you see there. It's a little bit low in the field. Sorry about that. Yeah. Dave Schmidt said hi to you. Did you miss that in the chat?
Oh, no, I see it.
Oh, okay.
Hi, David. I saw him earlier, said hello.
Oh, okay.
Said hi again, and I just said hello again.
Alrighty. Sorry, I was just asking.
You're worth it, David.
Oh, yeah.
I know you two have conferred about doing a program for David's students sometime, haven't you? Or did
Yes,
you?
we
Or
have.
are you going to?
Haven't done it yet. Want to do it for him.
That would be great.
Yeah. Looking forward to that. And David and I are trying to work out a time. I mean, and David, this coming Wednesday, I'm leaving for Norway. And I'll be there for the rest of August. I'm doing a speaking tour in Oslo and Bergen and Lunda. And doing some live commercials over there. But we're going to be... I'll be back at the end of August, so I'm not sure how long it'll be before when I get back. So I think it's going to be 2 days before I have to then go to Arizona and talk at the UFO Congress, which is Karen Berard's conference now, and she's doing such a better job of managing the UFO Congress than ever before, and so they've moved it to Central Phoenix, which is fantastic. And so I think that if you get, like I said, I've said this before, if you get a chance to go to UFO Congress, it's going to be worth it this year. There's a lot of good speakers. I'll be speaking. I'm not saying go because of me, but I'll certainly be talking. And my talk this year is going to be about. In fact, the title is "Where Does Science Go in the Face of the Unexplained?" And I'm going to actually share the weird experiences that this here astronomer has had that don't match his science. I'm not entirely comfortable talking about that, but that is exactly what happened. So why shouldn't I talk about it, right? I mean, I need to talk about it. It's about time to talk about it. So we'll do that. And so it's in downtown Phoenix, short distance from Sky Harbor Airport where you fly in. So you just Uber on over to the hotel where the UFO Congress is this year. Easy to get to, easy to enjoy. 15 seconds at 12,800, we're going to be looking at this guy right here, which is NGC 6881. And it's a planetary. And we should be able to, I think I see it actually, so it's off center by a little bit, I believe. Or did we not go there? It doesn't look like we moved from the, I must not have moved, my mistake. All right, let's get this to move now. There we go. Now we're moving. Okay, so here we go. So now let me just move this in. Just so you know, I actually had downloaded a whole new suite of music to use in the SkyTour, which is what we're hearing now.
Nice.
Yeah, it's just kind of fun. Okay, now we can do 15 seconds at 12,000 and see what we get. Let me see what people are saying out here.
Harry asked you a question or two a couple minutes ago.
Oh, okay. How far away are those stars?
Yeah, how far away they are or how far apart they are, something of the sort. Not sure of the context.
Okay, and what cluster was that we were talking about?
Might have still been the Crescent at the time.
Okay.
You were in Cygnus, I know.
Okay, is the Crescent... well, it's the Crescent 1,500 light years? You know what? I'm going to go find out, because that's a good question, Harry, and I'm not going to leave you hanging. All right, here's the Crescent Nebula one more time. And the distance is about 4,700 light years, actually, to the Crescent. All right, so the stars are going to be a few tens of light years away from each other near the Crescent, if they're at the same distance as the Crescent. Keep in mind, everything is in 3D. So we have quite a lot of learning to do about our universe. And we just took this photograph of this. There was a planetary here that I was taking a picture of. And I don't know where it went. I can't see it now. I have lost the planetary. I will say this, though. I got a little tiny bit of walk in my star images. And that's usually helpful to find the planetaries because they tend to be a little bit more blue. And you'll see a dragged out blue object unless... No, okay. I can't find it right now. I don't know why. I am looking at it, I think. Let me make sure. Let's go to...
How far away was the Crescent? 1,500 light years?
No, 4,700.
Say that one more time, please.
4,700 light years.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
I've heard it said before that, if you can see Sagittarius and say you point your right hand at Sagittarius, your pointer finger.
Yes.
And then you point your left hand up, straight up at Cygnus, you're making a right angle between your left arm and your right arm. And you can translate that as when you look at Cygnus from the center of the galaxy in Sagittarius, it's about 90 degrees, okay?
Yep.
That same right angle. And that when you're looking up and out at Cygnus, you're looking over at the next spiral arm of the galaxy.
That's right.
And well, if you're looking at the next spiral arm, I would say they're pretty far away.
Yeah.
Like 4,700 light years away.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You know, we got to remember the 3D place in the universe, and that's the thing we don't often we don't think about because we don't really know how the generally people don't really understand the 3D spaces and spatial distribution in the universe. You know.
Well, I used to do this sometimes when I did public programs. I would start here, and the moon's that far away, and it's going this direction, and well, we're here, and we're orbiting the sun at 67,000 miles an hour or whatever it is, and we're moving that way through space, and the sun is moving that way through space, kind of toward Vega, and then you keep tying that up, taking bigger steps, and well, here's the galaxy, and here's the way we're rotating, and well, golly, if you look over there at the right time of year when you can see Virgo, that's the direction our entire local group is heading to in space. And, you can keep building out from there.
Yeah.
And I can make people's head spins on a good night, when you try to, as Robert Heinlein once said, if you tried to grok the whole thing, it'll make you dizzy.
Sure. That's true. Very true. Let me see where we are here. That's not bad. There should be plenty of room. These are reflection nebulae, I believe, which are faint. Not going to be able to... It's H2, so I'm not going to be able to see those without a zero moon night. Some of these things, you just can't see in the bright light of the moon.
Yeah.
So let's go to NGC. This NGC actually that I was just looking at. And it'll be coming in here.
One reason I like Planetary is when the moon is up. I think that characteristic blue color.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Manages to stand out.
Yeah.
Even under bright moonlight.
Yep. As we've talked about, that characteristic blue is actually a result of the oxygen atoms that are in the nebula being ionized twice. So 2 electrons are stripped off the atom. And when they recombine with the atom, they give off light. And you say, well, how come it's only blue light? Does it give off different light? Yeah, actually it does. Different colors too. Same thing with hydrogen. But there's one particular frequency that tends to be the most dominant in any of these reactions. And in oxygen's case, especially doubly ionized oxygen, it has to do with where in the atom the electrons jump back into. So when they jump back into the atom, they might go to one particular place, one energy level. And then they will continue to cascade down to lower levels. And the particular level that they become most comfortable with happens to be the one where you see this beautiful teal blue in these beautiful planetary nebulae for the oxygen transitions. And those are actually transitions we cannot generate here on Earth. And so we call them forbidden lines, because they can't happen here in our atmosphere with the quantity of oxygen and density of oxygen we have here. It has to be a rarefied environment, that is an environment where there's very few oxygen atoms per cubic centimeter, kind of a thing. And that's how that works, and that's a really interesting problem with these atomic transitions. They can't all happen here on Earth. Many of them actually have to happen in the rarefied environments of space, where they can only occur. Otherwise, we call them forbidden.
I was reading about sky glow the other day. Not aurora, not northern lights, but it's called sky glow.
Correct.
You've doubtless seen this, Mark.
I mean air glow. Air glow?
Huh?
Air glow?
Air glow, sky glow. You'll often see it show up in astrophotos, or like panorama shots, or piggyback shots, where you'll see kind of a green glow overlaying the sky, a whole layer of sky.
Yep.
And there's also some that are red.
Yep.
Again, these are not aurora, but it's actually some sort of chemical luminescent thing going on in the sky after the sun sets.
Yeah.
Oxygen and such gets energized by ultraviolet during the daytime.
That's correct.
And then after dark, well, it's still re-emitting the light or whatever, but it's a chemical process.
Yeah, it's definitely that.
Yeah, the green comes from oxygen, and in this case too, I think there's also a red layer higher up that is also oxygen.
Right.
I don't know how that would translate to what you were saying about, like doubly ionized oxygen and forbidden lines and stuff like that, though.
Well, it doesn't actually relate directly to that, because of the fact that these are lines that are occurring within our atmosphere, and when you see photos taken from the darkest sites on Earth, Cerro Tololo and so forth, you see this. It's called air glow, specifically. And it really is air glow. It's actually what the atoms of nitrogen and oxygen and so forth are doing in our atmosphere. And after nightfall, the oxygen or the atoms are actually giving off this energy and emitting this light. So it's actually it's really one of those interesting phenomena that we have in our atmosphere, and is really
way up in the atmosphere.
Oh yeah, it's happening way up, but it's still within our atmosphere. Yeah. This is a beautiful gem. I'm going to move it down a little bit and show you one more time. So I'm not gonna transition us to here as I just did anyway. Okay, and I moved it down a little bit, so now I can take another photo. 15 seconds, 12,800, and you'll see that this cluster will now move down to about here, and we'll actually see it a little better. It's beautiful, little jewel box in the night sky in Cygnus. Okay, so here comes air glow. Is something that's it's in every single photo taken, even the ones that you take, Daryl, or I take. It's in this photo. We just cannot detect it sometimes. And when we do have air glow, it's the characteristic that we can't really do much about in our photos. But I'll tell you this, taking astronomical photos, we have to account for, especially for doing spectral work, we have to account for the inclusion of air glow in our spectra. Okay, for instance, air glow is an emission line. It's a line that's showing up as a bright line amid the spectrum, say, of the star we're taking an image of. And you'll say, well, hey, what's that doing there? And it's not the star giving off an emission line, although stars do give off emission lines. It's actually the glow of the atmosphere emitting this light, and you have to remove it from your spectra. I have a camera that I adapted for full spectrum, and what that means is when I take photos of the night sky, I also can pick off a little bit of the infrared and a little bit of the ultraviolet. And I can actually see water vapor lines, absorption lines, where the water vapor is absorbing some of the light coming into the atmosphere from a star. And it makes dark vertical lines in the spectrum out in the red end of the spectrum. And that's, they're called telluric lines, Telluric. And these telluric lines are in every spectrum that anyone takes. And we just have to live with them. There's no way to really not have them happen unless you use a space-borne telescope. See, so that's pretty much it. Hi, Deborah Hearn, how's it going? Welcome. Thanks for coming on out.
Yeah, if you ever look at the European Southern Observatory, VLT.
Yes.
Time-lapse video on YouTube. There are several shots in that video that show air glow, sky glow very well.
Yeah. That's the one where you see the louvers on the observatory opening and closing, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. The louvers are these large panels on the side of the observatory that have nothing to do with the telescope in particular. But what they do is they promote motion of the air, and they help shunt the air around so that the air inside the observatory stays as stable as possible, but still remains exchanged with the outside. You want the telescope to be the same temperature as the outside without suffering any additional effects from the outside air. Sorry, Daryl, go ahead.
Oh, that's fine. I was done.
Okay. Well, that was a beautiful cluster we just saw. That was NGC 6834. And now we have another little planetary over here. Can we see this guy? Oh, we looked at him, the footprint. Okay. Right now, I know that we've looked at a few of these. We looked at the dumbbell before. Actually, the dumbbell is going to be probably a little better placed. We can probably see how the dumbbell looks again right now, and then head for the other wonderful nebula here that we like to look at, and go then to the next items up for bid here, and the price is right. Okay, so we're going to bring in the dumbbell again for a moment, and you can of course see on our insets I've got the dome cams back so we can actually see what the dome is seeing, what the camera is seeing, the telescope, and what the telescope looks like from down below in the observatory building. So we're looking up at the telescope there. Okay. So let's see. Dumbbell, let's bring you over. Let's pop it a little more east and drop it a little bit south. Not much. And go west, young man. All right. 15 at 12.8. Let's see what we get.
Mark, I'd like to clarify something you were saying earlier about planetary nebulas.
Sure, go ahead.
Well, if I heard you correctly, you were saying planetary nebulas tend to be within a certain size range. Now,
Ooh.
that's their actual size, not their apparent size as we see it from Earth, just because the physical processes going on and how far away that white dwarf in the middle can irradiate the nebulosity, whatever, to make it glow,
Yes.
that they tend to be within certain size constraints.
Yeah.
Is that what you said earlier?
Yeah, I mean, a white dwarf, we typically know what the temperature of a white dwarf is. So we can kind of predict how far out the radiation would reach to ionize the oxygen to show us things as they are. Yeah. Exactly. So that kind of helps us.
Interesting picture.
Huh? Oh yeah, right.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the star trails. Continue though, please.
Yeah, that was this guy right here we were looking at. I've got another one. Dumbbells raised a little more to about here, and the telescope wasn't finished moving. That's better.
Okay. Well, anyway, yeah. So planetaries, their actual sizes, you could say they're comparable, I guess, from nebula to nebula, because of the nature of the white dwarf and how far away it can irradiate the nebulosity, I guess.
Yeah, but there's a caveat that I kind of glossed over, and I better mention it. And the caveat is that there are several types of planetary nebula. Okay, there are nebulae that are spherical shells. We see this in the little cluster in Puppis. We talked about it before. There's a planetary in this open cluster of stars, which
M46.
Yes, which is oddly a young cluster of stars with an old star in it. What does that mean? It means that old star is actually in the foreground, closer to us, and the young cluster is much farther away. But still, it's a spherical shell of this oxygen 3, O3, doubly ionized oxygen. And then there's planetary nebulae like this one. This is an hourglass shape. It's not a spherical shell. Okay, this one's called a bipolar planetary nebula. It actually has these lobes coming up. You see it's thicker up here and thicker down here and thinner around the outside. You can see that it kind of looks like it wants to be a spherical shell. And it is actually a bit spherical, but it's a concentration of material, which is here and here, probably along the poles of this star. So out of the north and south pole of the star, this material went out. And so that's one of the theories. The other theory is maybe it's along the equator of the star that's blown out like that. But we would have to look. I'd have to see for this one. Don't know which way that went. But that's kind of what we say. Now, is there more gas out here? Maybe there is. Maybe there's more gas from dumbbell out here. But if we're not seeing it either because my telescope hasn't captured it, or because it's beyond the range of being ionized by this little white dwarf. That little white dwarf in there has got a very high temperature, and it can ionize that hydrogen, that remnant hydrogen, the neon, which is partially responsible for the red along with the hydrogen, and of course the oxygen here getting doubly ionized. So there's a lot of that going on in the universe, and so we try to look at planetary nebulae and say, well, they're notoriously hard to get distances to, but and part of that reason is because of the different types. We know that ionization reaches out only a certain distance, and it's hard to get the full angular diameter of some of these planetaries. So it doesn't give very accurate results. So when we look, for instance, in stellarium here, and we say, oh, well, how far away is the dumbbell? Okay, we look at the dumbbell and we say, okay, the dumbbell nebula is 861 light years. Well, how do we know it's 861 light years? Okay, well, we know because we measure it in however we measure it to get the distance. But some of that accuracy, it's only as accurate as our estimates of the size of the nebula and the extents of the nebula. We don't fully understand. Sometimes, in fact, just lately, there's been some talk that says that some of the planetary nebulae are generated by these very bright Wolf-Rayet stars, which
we talked about that.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, it's very, very, very hot stars that are actually generating some of this, and that's really quite fascinating. If it's if it's actually shown to be true, which I think it will and has been. So it's an interesting prospect,
Well, but I was wondering earlier when you talked about that size limits of planetaries or whatever. The other part of this would be like the nebula's apparent or angular size in the sky, which would help show how close or how far that object actually is to us, or how far that object is relative to another planetary nebula, how big or small it appears in the sky, basically.
Yeah.
Like you take the Dumbbell here, or you take the Ring Nebula, and then you go look at the Helix Nebula, which...
massive.
It's huge in the sky. It's like bigger than the moon, I think, in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
But because it's so dim, like you were saying earlier, if you were in a spaceship and you flew through it, you wouldn't even know it was there, maybe,
Yeah, that's true.
But the Helix maybe is an extreme example just because it's a relatively close planetary nebula to us. It's a darn thing is so big.
Yeah.
It's so faint that it's hard to see.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing, too, to consider, everybody, is when you're looking at these planetary nebulae, and let's just go back to look at one for a minute. When you're looking at these planetary nebulae, when you see this nebula, you say, well, okay, if we know how far out a gas can be irradiated and ionized by the white dwarf. So you say, okay, that means this nebula has to be this far away because we know how far away it is. We know the angular diameter in the sky, thus we can figure the distance to it. That works only if the gas from the star has already reached that limit. But if it's a younger planetary nebula, then maybe the nebula is still expanding and still has several light years, parts of a light year to go before it gets to its full diameter in the sky. So in that case, we will make a mistake trying to figure out how far away it is, and that becomes an issue. And so that's why we have to figure that out, and that's why we need to actually take a step in the direction of trying to identify how far along, say, a planetary nebula is in its development. Sure, the white dwarf can be there, but does that mean that this nebula is already fully developed, or is there more coming? Is the dumbbell going to get bigger? If it gets bigger, it's closer to us, isn't it?
Sure.
Potentially. So there's a lot of reasons why it's notoriously hard to calculate the distance to one of these nebulae. But it all comes from trying to look at the processes that are in place. So that's one of those interesting issues that we face. And where am I going right now? Oh yes, I'm at the angelfish. All right, so let's go back to the angelfish. Let's do 15 seconds at 12,800. And let me just check my scope here. Jog-a-rooney and go. Harry, what do you mean about that? He said, "Boy, you should hear I think he said meant non-believers that don't believe in a light year." Well, it's down here. It's just out of view. Let me bring it up for you guys. Yeah, well, there are people that have trouble with astronomy and astronomy-related sciences, no doubt. And I know that there are people that have a problem with that, but you know what? I'm sorry, I'm not science-free. I am not. 10,000. I dropped it from 12,800 to 10,000. 15 seconds. Astro Live, you talking about the dumbbell that you want to capture?
I read today somewhere that the flat Earth guy with the rocket was going to try to launch himself again.
Oh, Mad Mike Hughes.
Yeah.
You know what? More power to him.
Hey, I hope he walks away from it.
And I'm going to go to HE Double Toothpicks for having laughed so hysterically when he made the last attempt. You saw the rocket go. You saw this rear view camera facing backwards, looking at him taking off, and you actually saw the rocket come down, hit the ground. You saw the cameras bounce around, and there was dead silence for about 10 seconds. And you hear, oh yeah. I'm telling you, it was really rotten of me, but I laughed so hard, I thought I was gonna cry. My stomach hurt because it's like listening to this guy. I just couldn't believe what he did. We're getting a little dome interference here, I think. I have the red light on, which is my signal that the dome is at the edge. With the roll-off roof, I'm not going to have that problem. It's going to be totally open the entire night. And it makes it easier for the dome to acclimate to the temperatures. But I believe we're going to run a little bit on the edge. How can I tell? Well, I can go look at our... Yeah, if you can see here, we're probably on the left edge of the dome there.
Uh-huh.
But that's okay. I'm going to... or we have a cloud. Actually, it could be clouds, too. Let me pull away here, because we're in Sagitta. Alright. And this is a planetary down here. Let's see for sure. If we get one here, then we have a problem with the telescope impacting the dome. Not impacting, but being near the dome. So let's go move the telescope now. There we go. It's moving. And we'll come in. We'll see stars. And
that's the constellation Sagitta, the arrow.
Sagitta, yeah. I've called it Sagitta, Sagitta. And you're right. Sagitta is the arrow. Yes, it is.
For the flat earthers, I've always wondered, you might have an opinion or some facts on this, is how high do you have to be to really see the curvature of the earth? I used to have a neighbor who was a hang glider, and he said when he got a lot of altitude, he could see the curvature of the earth. I don't know what kind of altitude that would be.
Yeah.
I know he didn't have breathing apparatus, so he wasn't too high, but the mountains here top out at 14,000 or so, and I assume he was up about that high, if not a little higher.
Yeah, that's not a good enough altitude, actually.
Yeah. How high do you have to be to see the curvature of the earth?
Well,
could we buy the guy a plane ride?
the U2 actually at 71,000 feet could just barely see the curvature of the earth at 71,000. So you can't see it in a jet at 39,000, 32,000. It's not possible to see it until you actually get up that high,
And when they see the curvature of the earth, when you see the curvature of the earth, or whoever, is it so much the earth curving away from you and toward you, or curving off to the sides, or all those put together that you really get the dimensionality of it?
Yeah, it's actually, it's you should be able to see the earth if you're gonna get the see the curvature of the earth. It would actually, again, if you're vertical, the Earth would curve off to your left and right, as it should. I think that's what you're asking, yes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's all right. Yeah, it's just... This might be an interesting photo. I think the telescope dragged a little... Yes, Bonnie, it is kind of scary at how insignificant we are in the universe. But you know what? It's scary and it's not so scary, because I actually think that that gives us sort of an advantage, because we're kind of like the new kids on the block, aren't we? I mean, we don't represent a threat to the universe. We don't represent a threat to any creatures in the universe, actually. But we do represent, I think, a curiosity to the creatures in the universe. And that, I think, is the most important part. We are a curiosity. And I find that being a curiosity means that they'll watch us, they'll probe us, they might tag a few of us, but they won't kill us because we haven't demonstrated that we should be destroyed. Oh yes, we've made science fiction movies that show that maybe we should be all eliminated, but the fact of the matter is, in the real world, in real life, we're just babies in the universe. So, we haven't even left our home world, and they're here from their home world. Clearly, they're way ahead of us. And to get where they are, to go interstellar, means they had to work through all their own problems as a young civilization, probably thousands, if not even millions of years ago. And they made their way here to see us, maybe. Because, I've said this many times before, we have an oxygen atmosphere. And you're like, what? Well, Stephen Hawking, if you recall, he said, we should not broadcast our presence to aliens. Yet, we have been broadcasting our presence to aliens for over 3 billion years. And that presence is belied by the fact that we have oxygen in our atmosphere. Oxygen loves to bond with everything it can find in the ground. And this bonding process is nothing short of expected by oxygen. With oxygen, you put it into the ground and it bonds with almost everything. It's an extremely active element and a very, very volatile atom that way. So you combine it with iron, it becomes Fe2O3, 2 irons and 3 oxygens, and that's rust, and that's what Mars has. Mars rusted, the oxygen in its atmosphere ripped apart from water molecules by the ultraviolet radiation from the sun, went down into the ground and rusted, bonded with the iron elements. So oxygen in our atmosphere, though, shouldn't be there. Just like it's not on Mars, it shouldn't be in our atmosphere either, unless it's being replaced by something. Every single day, oxygen is bonding with compounds. Every single day. Millions upon billions upon trillions of oxygen atoms every day are leaving our atmosphere and bonding with materials in our soils, in our oceans, and they are being transformed into parts of compounds and so forth. So the oxygen in our atmosphere is there by virtue of the fact that there has been something that has been replacing it. And any species in our universe that's carbon-based will use oxygen, probably, most likely, for part of its energy generating process, just like we do. And thus, if you see oxygen in an atmosphere, even from thousands and thousands and thousands of light years away, you're going to see a planet where oxygen present means that life is present, because it's life, in all likelihood, that's replenishing the oxygen. Isn't that interesting? I mean, so from tens of thousands of light years away, we would be giving ourselves away. And we started showing the oxygen in our atmosphere around 2 billion years ago when the oxygen started building up in our atmosphere. So guess what? It means that any light that was snagged coming to an alien planet up to 2 billion light years away was actually giving away our presence. And we weren't even here yet. It would still be another 2 billion years, 2.5 billion years before we even showed up. And before the explosion of life on the planet. So you see, our perspective is that we have been a beacon in the dark, attracting alien life here ever since 2 billion years ago. So the time for us to not signal aliens has long since passed. And if they were going to find us, they will have come, said, wow, what an interesting place. There's going to be some kind of life here. Should we leave it alone, Torgon? I think so, Frankie. Let's leave it alone. Okay. And they move on. Or maybe they leave a scout in the way of a gray alien, maybe a robotic gray alien civilization or workers. Little drones. Their robots are probably biological robots. We're not that far from that. Actually, we've already thought of it. So maybe theirs is made in their likeness, and just like some of the robots we make to work in warehouses and pick up boxes, they walk, and they have arms, and they pick up boxes and stack them. They look like humanoid robots. Well, maybe an alien species has made an alien biological robot in the same likeness as them. So when we look into the lifeless eyes of a gray alien, with those big black almond-shaped eyes, maybe we're seeing his makers, or its makers. So, that's just a little monologue for tonight. I apologize that I kind of went on there, but if you think about it, that's kind of where everything goes. It's sort of appropriate to have this image up, because we have this little planetary nebula in the middle here that we were looking for right there. And this little planetary nebula is the remnant of a dying star, and this is a cluster of new stars, young stars. Here's another small cluster of young stars. Amid the life, we have some death, and the universe is all about life and death and cycles that renew and begin again. And that's what we see in this one photo right here. And that's actually kind of a logical place to end our 2-hour stream tonight. And I do want to thank you guys for coming out. If you got any questions, please send them to me at SkyTour Radio at kgraradio.com. And tune in to SkyTour Radio on Sunday nights from 8 until 10 p.m. Eastern Time on kgraradio.com. We actually, I'm humbled. We have a very highly rated show. We're number 4. Sometimes number 3 in our time slot with iHeartRadio and TalkStream Live, and we reach about 3 million people a month, and we've been around for about a year. So SkyTour Radio is moving, and we're very, very happy to see this popularity. It just shows me that people want to see and hear science, and I love it. It really makes me feel good about that, And so we have guys like Daryl on, who's just a marvelous. And he's brilliant, actually, but doesn't like to talk about that. See that? He's brilliant, and he's very knowledgeable. And I like to talk about astronomy. He adds things that I forget about, and we kind of do that. And Amanda's been around, but I asked her about coming in tonight, but I haven't heard from her. So, but she's always for SkyTour Radio. She's always there when she can be. Well, anyway, I want to thank you guys for coming out tonight. I'm going to go to bed because tomorrow I have to continue working on my presentation for the Norwegian trip. And then I have to write a presentation in the 2-day interval when I get back, and then go to Phoenix and deliver it at the UFO Congress. I actually know exactly what I'm going to say. And it's going to be similar, but really quite different from the Norwegian talk. But they all deal with the failure of science at times. So it'll be really interesting, I think, to hear that one. Hopefully, like I said, if you guys get a chance, come on out to Phoenix and watch the or visit the UFO Congress and check it out. I would love to see you out there. And if you can't make it, then you might as well look in and see. I'm not sure if they're doing any streaming at UFO Congress this year. But if so, yeah, I would get into the streams if they have them. But hey, I'm glad and thank you, Cindy. Cindy says I love science. Of course, science is the tool that is going to become the means or lead to the means by which we actually leave the planet someday. And I just am very, very pleased with the response and how people respond to science. Daisy and Zoe, thank you for coming. Thank you again. And I will try to have some awesome 3D dreams myself. So I think Daryl and I wish everybody a good night. Yes, Daryl? You wish everybody a good night, right?
Sure. Good night, everybody. Thanks for coming. Thanks for having me on, Mark.
Of course, Daryl. All right, folks. We're going to leave the star image up for a bit, and then we'll shut down the stream. But thank you for coming, folks. And if it's clear tomorrow night, well, then maybe we will stream also. Now, SkyTour Radio is tomorrow night as well. But we will still be streaming if it's clear. And we'll stream the Perseid meteor shower as well. So anyway, I will talk to you guys tomorrow, perhaps. And if not, I'll talk to you tomorrow night for sure with SkyTour Radio on KGRA Radio. This is Mark D'Antonio signing off for tonight. Thank you all for coming out, and we'll see you later.